Hello, Endeavour, and a very happy summer holidays to you. You join us for our final episode of my final recording during our lockdown experience of the Epilogue of The Fire Thief by Terry Deary. Eden City, 1863. You'll have gathered that I wrote this story years after it happened. Sometimes that amazing year in 1858 seems like a dream within a dream. But look at the history books and you'll see that Eden City began to change that year. When I left, it was a place with all the sorrows of Pandora's curse. When I returned, it wasn't a new Olympus, but it had been touched by the gods. That's how I knew my 2 days with Prometheus hadn't been a dream. So let me take you back, just 5 years on. January and I stepped off the train and looked around Eden City Station. We got off at the wrong stop, January said. It seemed a very different Eden City. We'd left 5 years before. The people who bustled around the platform seemed so cheerful. The shadows no longer sucked at your soul and sniggered, and now they seemed to smile. Uncle Edward stepped down after us, a little fatter and with his hair dyed brown. After all, Uncle Edward was supposed to have been hanged here 5 years ago. We call him Uncle Edwin now, Dead Edward's twin brother. Jan had changed the way we lived. She told us we were such good actors, we could make a fine living from doing our shows. We didn't need to rob the rich and risk everything in each town we visited. And Jan turned out to have a talent for acting too. We added new stories for her to perform. We borrowed some of the English gentleman's tales. Jan's death of Little Belle made grown men weep. Of course, I still love doing the uncle with the skinny skeleton, and the boy who stood on the burning deck had audiences jumping to their feet to applaud. January is good, but not as good as me. Sorry, she has read this and says I'm dreaming. She says she's the best thing to have happened to me and Uncle Edward in our miserable lives. And I will never admit that. I may agree, but I'll never admit it. We were invited everywhere and paid enough to let us live well. Of course, January and I had grown by the time we returned. My ban from Eden City was over, but I doubted whether any police officers would have recognised the tall, well-built young man who'd stepped off the train as Little Jim as the thief. Jam's own father would not have recognised the red-haired girl in the cotton gown who stood beside me. It looks like Eden City, I said, but it's changed. A girl with rosy cheeks and golden hair stepped down with an armful of flowers. Welcome to Eden City, she said. She gave January a handful of flowers and smiled. Enjoy your stay. Jan shook her head. Thank you, but is this what you do, give flowers away to travellers? The girl smiled brightly. Yes, it's a lovely job. 5 years ago, I was living on the streets selling matches and slowly dying. I remember you, I said quietly. What happened? Mr. Mucklethrift, the good neighbour of Eden City, rescued me from the streets and got his doctors to make me well again. Uncle Eddie shook his head. But why? He's the meanest, cruellest man anyone's ever met. He was, she agreed, and then they say he's had a dream, a visit from the spirits. It changed his life. It changed all our lives. Now he gives all the money from the factory to Eden City to make it a better place. It still has smoke in it, I know, she said, but the people are happy thanks to Mr. Mucklethrift. Then I knew that Zeus had kept his promise. He said he'd reward Theus for being brave. He said he'd take away some of Pandora's terrors and make the city a better place. He'd kept his promise. What had he done? Later that day we went to Mucklethrift Manor. The streets of Eden City were clean. Constables Drab and Dross were there to help people. Not much crime in Eden City, Dross said, smiling. The last big case we had was when the Mayor Tweed was thrown into jail for stealing the city's taxes. You can't drive out all the greed in the world, I guess, Uncle Eddie said. The policeman agreed. But the people of Eden City have enough money to get by on. They don't need to thieve. The people in the factory are well paid, and Mr. Mucklethrift has built a special home for the city's orphan babies. The baby farm has closed down. Mr. Mucklethrift even makes sure the poor and street beggars are cared for at the Storm Inn. The Storm Inn, January said. That's an odd place to care for poor people. No, it's a care home for the needy now, the policeman explained. Mr. Storm serves such good food. He does? January gasped. He must have been taking cookery lessons. The food is so good even the rich go there to taste his stew. They travel for miles for the special flavour of his dish. Liver? I asked. How did you guess? Just a hunch, I said. Enjoy your stay, Dross said, and we walked on down the street and he called after us. Oh, and I'm sorry what happened to your brother, Mr. Slaughter, he said. We got over that, Uncle Eddie said with a smile. At Mucklethrift factory, gate workers strolled outside to chat and enjoy their coffee break. A notice on the gate read, Sorry, we do not employ children under the age of 12. The chimneys still poured their purple and yellow smoke into the dead air, but Zeus has said he couldn't not stop all human madness with their fire. The clean streets and the brightly painted shops saw little of the weak autumn sun through the smog. Still, Eden City was a better place than when we'd left. Only the tumble-down Temple of the Heroes looked as derelict as it had been before. The front door of Mucklethrift Manor was open and a smiling butler was welcoming messengers, business people and visitors. Of course, Mr. Mucklethrift will be happy to see you. He still talks about the show your brother did 5 years ago, Mr. Slaughter. It was the very next day that he had a visit from the spirit, you know. Ah, and that visit changed him, did it? Oh, indeed, your dead brother changed Eden City forever. He did? Uncle Eddie blinked. Go into the library, Mr. Mucklethrift will be so pleased to see you. And the old man was. He shook hands with us warmly and sat us down at the library table, the one where Zeus and Theus had met those 5 long years before. His tale was a strange one. Only Jan and I really understood what had happened. We hanged your brother, Mr. Mucklethrift said. Mayor Tweed insisted, but I was never happy. And that night when I fell asleep, he visited me. Mayor Tweed visited you in bed, Uncle Eddie exclaimed. No, your dead brother's spirit visited me. I woke as the town hall clock struck 1 and saw him standing at the end of my bed. I was afraid. I'd be too, January agreed. He said I was too greedy and didn't care about my fellow humans, and then he set up his old magic lantern and showed me pictures, but the pictures were moving, talking pictures, not like your usual magic lantern. What did you see? Uncle Eddie asked. Oh, I saw the horrors of Eden City, the suffering of the baby farm and begging, and worst of all, the dying match girl in the gutter. Horrible, Uncle Eddie agreed. And then he showed me my own future. He showed me moving pictures of a place he called the Underworld. There was a dog with 9 heads. It would let me into the Underworld and it'd tear me apart even if I tried to get out. Cerebus, Uncle Eddie said. He knew a lot about old tales. The tortures in that Underworld were too horrible to repeat, Mr. Mucklethrift said. I tried to tell your brother's ghost that he was just a nightmare, but he opened the door and in walked the most hideous creature I'd ever seen or smelled. It had 3 heads that squabbled with each other, and when they worked together they could breathe bouts of fire and burn me to a cinder. Zeus had brought his palace pet, the Chimera, to Eden City. That would be monster enough to frighten any man out of his misery. Mr. Mucklethrift's eyes widened. The lion head kept roaring at the goat head. It was scary, and Mr. Slaughter's spirit said something about escaping the power of Pandora. What do you think he meant? He meant you must do your best to drive misery out of Eden City, I said. That would be the only way to escape fire. He nodded. That's what I thought, and that's what I've tried to do ever since. I sold most of my riches to make Eden City a better place for us all to live, and the money from my factory keeps it that way. Do you think Edward Slaughter has forgiven me for having him hanged? Has he been back since that night? January asked. No, I never saw him again. Then Edward Slaughter is resting, she said. Uncle Eddie smiled. Edward Slaughter forgives you. And that, dear reader, only leaves poor Prometheus. I cannot tell you where he is or if he escaped the Avenger. I'd like to think he has. When he took off from the Temple of the Hero and damaged the and the damaged Avenger set off after him, I think the Avenger flew into the future. If I'd been the Fury, that's what I would have done. But I know that Prometheus was still looking for the hero. There was only one place to find him. Somewhere in the gloomy, grimy past of Eden City. If Theus is in the past and the Fury's in the future, then Theus is safe. The Titans and the gods and we hairless human creatures are all made from the same stuff, from the dust of distant stars. So Theus and Zeus, January and I are all cousins. And so are you, dear reader. I wonder if Theus will ever find that hero. I hope so. That's the one thing Pandora left us. Hope. Have a great summer, guys. I will see you in September. Bye.